Hello, it's Arie Nijman of Blu Bird Flight Training. In this video I want to tell you about the altimeter. The altimeter you usually find in airplanes and helicopters does not actually measure altitude. It measures ambient air pressure and presents it as altitude or height, depending on what you as the pilot need it to do. So how does that work? Well, as we know, air pressure always decreases with increasing altitude. And we just told the altimeter what altitude to present to us at certain pressure levels. In other words, when the altimeter measures ambient air pressure, as it always does, it will present to the pilot the altitude that corresponds with that pressure in the so-called international standard atmosphere. Why so complicated, I can hear you think. Can't you just measure height above the ground? I suppose you could, but it wouldn't be very practical. You see, not only do we want to know our own altitude, but for aircraft to be safe, pilots also need to know if other aircraft in the vicinity aren't at the same level. That's because, for the obvious reasons, they don't want to get too close to one another. Now, with an indication of height above the Earth's surface, in mountainous terrain, for instance, every pilot would see a different number from all his or her colleagues, even those nearby. And besides, even when flying at moderate airspeed, the number would be changing fast all the time, making vertical separation impossible. Now, when we use ambient pressure as a reference, all pilots have a stable and reliable indication of altitude in the area they're flying in. So that's why. So, before flight, we must tell our altimeter what we expect it to present to us. It has a rotary knob with which we choose the air pressure level that we want it to use as a starting point, as our zero. Without that input, our altimeter has no way of knowing what exactly to present to us. So how do we do that? As long as there's a chance of encountering any kind of earthly obstacle, be it wind turbines, antenna masts or any elevation, we must use the actual air pressure at mean sea level as our reference pressure. That's clever, because elevations on aviation charts are also measured above or below mean sea level. So that provides safety as long as everyone joins in. Now, at some point, especially for airliners, there comes an altitude at which chances of encountering obstacles are no longer there. The only potential obstacle that remains is our colleague coming the other way. In that case, we select 1013 hectopascals in the subscale as our point zero. It is the worldwide agreed on reference for flying so-called flight levels. The altitude at which to switch from actual sea level pressure to 1013 varies per area and is to be found in aeronautical information publications. The third and last way of using the altimeter is by simply turning the indicating hands to zero when on the ground, wherever you are. In the subscale, you will then see the actual ambient pressure at your position. It is sometimes done for local flights, for instance circuit training. In such cases, it may come in handy to always have a reference to the runway, fly your circuit pattern at actual circuit height, and indeed read zero when on the ground. Well, enough for now. One more thing though, when you go home after your flight, your altimeter does not rest. It stays on the job, night and day. That's because it reacts to air pressure, which changes all the time. Make sure you check the day after you parked it. I bet you 10 to 1 the altitude indication will have changed overnight, if only slightly. Want to know more? Visit us at www.blubird.nl. Blue without the E. Why? Tell you about that later.